Hidden beneath the familiar tales of knights in shining armor lies a world of forgotten brotherhoods. We know the famous Templars, but history has erased dozens of other knightly orders from our collective memory. By the end of this journey, you will know the true stories of 25 lost orders of knights, their rises and their mysterious falls. How does an entire military brotherhood, sworn to sacred duty, simply vanish from the pages of history? What secrets do their scattered ruins and fragmented records still hold? This exploration will reveal a medieval landscape far more complex and shadowed than any textbook describes. What does it truly mean for a legacy to be lost to time? Their power was built upon a foundation of faith and warfare. Across the High Middle Ages, especially as the Crusades raged, the Pope himself authorized the creation of these unique brotherhoods. They were not just knights, they were monks sworn to a divine cause, protecting travelers on dangerous roads and fighting for holy lands. This official blessing allowed them to accumulate immense wealth, vast estates, and deep political sway throughout the Christian world. But their existence was always precarious, tied to the shifting sands of power. A king could feel threatened by their influence, a crusade could end in a disastrous defeat, or public passion for holy war could simply cool and fade away. When royal authority consolidated, these independent military orders were often the first to be suppressed, their lands seized, their members absorbed into other groups, or their charters simply revoked. It was this constant state of political and religious upheaval that allowed so many to slip through the cracks of history, their complete stories erased until now. Our journey into silence begins with one of the most poignant of these forgotten brotherhoods, the Order of Saint. In the quiet Tuscan landscape, the Order of St. James of carved out a different kind of knighthood. Their battlefield was the Via, one of medieval Europe's most vital pilgrimage roads leading to Rome. From as early as the 11th century, these knight brothers were not primarily soldiers. They were guardians of the way, sworn to protect weary travelers from bandits and the wilderness itself. Their legacy was built not in towering castles, but in practical, life-saving infrastructure. They constructed sturdy bridges over treacherous rivers, founded hospitals to tend to the sick and injured, and maintained hostels that offered safe refuge for the night. For centuries, their network of care made the arduous journey to holy sites possible for countless pilgrims. They even earned the affectionate nickname the Knights of the Tau for the distinctive tie-shaped cross they wore on their black mantles. Yet this essential brotherhood could not withstand the slow shifts of history. Pilgrimage routes changed over time, and larger, more centralized institutions began to absorb the charitable works that had defined the order. By the 16th century, the Order of St. James of had faded away, its properties and duties dispersed. The town that bears its name still stands, a quiet monument to a knightly mission where service was the highest form of valor. This dedication to protecting the vulnerable finds a powerful and tragic echo in our next story. While the knights have guarded the roads, a far more intense conflict was unfolding within the very heart of Christendom. The militia of the faith of Jesus Christ arose not on distant crusader battlefields, but in the rolling hills of southern France in the early 13th century. Their sworn enemy was not a foreign army, but a spiritual one, the Cathar heresy that had taken deep root in the region. Pope Innocent III himself gave this new brotherhood his blessing, making them the official military arm of the Church during the brutal crusade. Their mission was unique and inward-facing, to root out and destroy what the Church deemed a dangerous corruption of the faith from within its own lands. Imagine knights clad not for a holy war in Jerusalem, but for an ideological war in their own neighborhoods, a chilling concept that blurred the lines between soldier, inquisitor, and believer. Their entire identity was forged in the fire of this specific struggle. But what happens to a weapon when the war is won? The answer proved to be their undoing. Once the Cathar movement was effectively crushed through military and political force, the militia of the faith of Jesus Christ had no purpose left. Its reason for being had evaporated. Within a few short decades, the order was formally dissolved. Its remaining knights were simply encouraged to fold into the much larger and more permanent Teutonic order, their properties and legacy absorbed without a trace. The brief, fiery existence of the militia was snuffed out by its own success, leaving behind little more than a few scattered mentions in old papal decrees. It is a stark lesson in how an order's fate could be sealed by the very conflict that gave it life, a theme of fragile purpose we will encounter time and again in the shadows of history. While the militia of the faith fought its war at home, a different kind of battle raged along the sun-drenched coast of the Crown of Aragon. Here, the Order of St. George carved out its purpose not on horseback, but on the decks of warships. Founded in the year 1201, these knights were the guardians of the Catalan shore, their mission to repel relentless raids by Muslim pirates and to push forward the long campaign of the. For more than 300 years, their galleys patrolled the Mediterranean, a persistent but perpetually overshadowed force. They never amassed the legendary treasuries or sprawling commanderies of the great military orders. Their story is one of quiet, dogged persistence, a constant struggle against the sea and against obscurity. That struggle finally reached its end in the year 1400. Seeking to create a more powerful and unified institution, King Martin of Aragon decreed their merger with the larger Order of. It was not a dramatic dissolution, but a quiet administrative absorption. The dragon-slaying saint on their banner was folded into another's heraldry, and their 3 centuries of distinct service were slowly erased from common memory. This merger is a classic, almost silent, path to historical oblivion. How many such brotherhoods were simply assimilated, their identities consumed by a larger, hungrier entity? The fate of these coastal knights reminds us that for every order that fell in a blaze of glory, another simply faded away through a royal signature on a parchment. From the warm Mediterranean, our search for the lost now carries us to the cold, misty frontiers of the north. The harsh northeastern frontier of medieval Poland was a land perpetually braced for attack. Here in the early 13th century, Duke founded a desperate solution, the Order of. These knights, often called the Brothers of, were a distinctly Polish answer to a relentless threat. Their sacred duty was twofold: to defend the vulnerable Christian settlements of, and to wage a constant, brutal war against the pagan Old Prussians across the border. They were created out of sheer necessity, a local shield against Baltic tribes whose raids endangered the very survival of the Polish frontier. For a brief moment, they stood as their own masters, a knightly brotherhood born of Polish soil, but that moment was tragically short. Their independence proved to be an illusion, shattered by the ambitions of a far more powerful neighbor. The Teutonic Order, a massive and expansionist German crusading order, was invited into the region by the same duke who had founded the brothers. Seeing the small Polish order as either a rival or a useful asset, the Teutonic Knights simply absorbed the entire Order of around the year 1235. It was not a merger of equals, but an outright annexation. The Knights of lost their identity overnight, their distinctive banners folded away as they became just another regiment within the vast Teutonic machine. Their entire history, a brief and localized struggle for survival, was completely overshadowed by the epic, centuries-long conflict that would later erupt between the Kingdom of Poland and the Teutonic Order they had joined. The brothers serve as a stark example of how a knightly order could be crushed by geopolitical forces before it ever had a chance to forge its own lasting legend, a small flame snuffed out by a coming storm. And sometimes, the forces that erased an order were not those of a rival army, but of a changing world. The story of the Order of St. Thomas of Acre begins not with a king's decree, but with the desperate grief of English crusaders far from home. In the chaotic aftermath of the Third Crusade, a group of these men channeled their sorrow into a new kind of brotherhood, founded in the Holy Land and dedicated to a uniquely English martyr, St. Thomas Becket. Their initial mission was one of mercy, not war, establishing a hospital to care for the sick and wounded pilgrims streaming into the region. They were healers first. Yet the brutal reality of the Crusader states soon forced a profound transformation. To protect the very people they were trying to heal, they had to become warriors, officially recognized as a military order by Pope Innocent III in the early 13th century. Imagine the shift in their daily lives, trading medical supplies for swords and shields, all while keeping the distinctive red cross and martyr's scallop shell on their mantles. For nearly a century, these English warrior monks held their ground, their headquarters in the city of Acre becoming a bastion of both faith and force. But their world was about to collapse. When the armies stormed and captured Acre in 1291, it marked the final, shattering end of the Christian presence in the Holy Land. In the smoke and ruin, the Order of St. Thomas managed a narrow escape, relocating its entire operation first to the island of Cyprus. The military chapter of their story, however, was effectively over. Without a holy war to fight, what was the purpose of a crusading order? Their answer was a slow, deliberate retreat from violence. Moving their headquarters to London, they shed their military role entirely, reverting back to their original identity as an clerical order. They became quiet canons, managing their English estates and performing charitable works, a world away from the battlements of Acre. This peaceful evolution, however, became their path to obscurity. They no longer fit the dramatic mold of warrior monks, and without a military function, they faded from the spotlight of history and royal favor. Their final end came not on a battlefield, but from a signature on a document. During the English Reformation, King Henry VIII dissolved the order, seizing its properties and scattering its members. The long journey of the Order of St. Thomas of Acre, from battlefield healers to London canons, was complete. Their legacy was not erased by a single catastrophic defeat, but by the slow, quiet tide of irrelevance, a reminder that sometimes the most profound loss is not of life, but of purpose. The violent frontier of the Baltic birthed a brotherhood forged in fire and conquest. In the year 1202, a small band of German crusaders established the Livonian Brothers of the Sword, an order with a singular, ruthless goal. Their mission was to subjugate the last pagan lands of Europe, the territories we now know as Latvia and Estonia. They were not merely soldiers, they were colonizers and converters, and they were terrifyingly effective. With relentless campaigns, they carved out their own independent state, a crusader territory called Livonia, ruled entirely by the order itself. For over 3 decades, their power seemed unshakable, built upon a foundation of military might and religious fervor. But the very lands they sought to conquer held the seeds of their destruction. In 1236, the order marched out to confront a coalition of Lithuanian and forces near a place called. The battle was not just a defeat, it was an annihilation. The Sword Brethren and their allied forces were surrounded and cut to pieces, losing their Grand Master and the bulk of their knightly brotherhood on that single, bloody day. This catastrophic loss shattered the Order's power completely. With their military strength broken and their survival in question, they had no choice. The following year, the shattered remnants of the Brotherhood were formally absorbed by the Teutonic Order, their northern rivals. They became the Livonian branch of the Teutonics, their distinct identity and fierce independence erased forever. The Sword Brethren stand as a brutal lesson in the fragility of power. Their entire existence, 3 decades of conquest and state building, was utterly undone in one afternoon, proving that, on the medieval frontier, a single battle could rewrite history and consign an entire order to the footnotes of a larger, more dominant story. From the Baltic's shattered swords, we travel to the sun-baked hills of Aragon, where a knight's personal crisis of faith would birth another doomed brotherhood. The Order of, founded around the year 1173, began not with a royal decree, but with the disillusionment of a single man, a knight of the Temple named. He broke from the powerful Templars, seeking a path he felt was more pure and austere. The rule he wrote for his new order was a fascinating hybrid, weaving together the strict, monk-like discipline of the Cistercian tradition with the unwavering military duty of a crusader. This was to be a brotherhood of extreme devotion, a spiritual warrior's answer to what he may have seen as the growing worldliness of his former comrades. Yet this very idealism, this quest for a perfect form of knighthood, contained the seeds of its own failure. Almost from the moment of its creation, the Order of was pulled apart by conflicting loyalties and ambitions. It fractured internally, splitting into at least 2 distinct factions that could not hold together. One branch, perhaps feeling the pull of its Templar roots, chose to merge back into the vast and powerful organization its founder had left. The other faction, based in the Holy Land and clinging to its identity, found itself struggling for survival. Without a unified purpose or a secure homeland, this remnant was eventually, and inevitably, absorbed by the powerful Spanish Order of. The Order of did not fall in a great battle or get dissolved by a king. It simply unraveled, its pieces swallowed by larger, more stable institutions. Its story is not one of a single, dramatic end, but of a slow-motion disintegration, a fragmentation that prevented it from ever building a legacy of its own. It became a mere footnote in the family trees of the orders that consumed it, a tangled web of what might have been. This dissolution through internal division presents yet another quiet path to historical oblivion, proving that sometimes an order's greatest enemy was not a foreign army, but its own inability to remain whole. A dream of peace could be just as fragile as a castle made of sand. In the turbulent 13th century, a small group of French knights dared to form the Order of the Faith and Peace, an organization with a mission that sounds almost contradictory to our modern ears. Their goal was to use the tools of a knight, the sword and the shield, not to wage war, but to prevent it. In an era often plagued by feudal anarchy, when rogue knights and mercenary bands could terrorize the countryside with little consequence, this order swore a unique oath. They became the protectors of the defenseless, specifically aiming their blades at those who would harm churches, clergy, and pilgrims. Think of them as a kind of chivalric police force, trying to impose a code of honor upon a world drowning in violence. They were an attempt to answer a desperate question: how do you force peace upon a society built for war? The answer, it turned out, was that you could not do it alone. For all its noble intentions, the Order of the Faith and Peace was born without the one thing it truly needed to survive: unshakable institutional power. It lacked the vast estates of the Templars, the direct papal command of or the fervent royal backing that other orders enjoyed. It was a small flame of idealism in a very cold, practical world. And so, its story is one of the briefest in our chronicle. It flickered into existence, earned a mention in a handful of chronicles for its commendable aim, and then, almost as quickly, it vanished. There was no great battle to mark its end, no royal decree of dissolution. It simply faded away, its knights dispersing, its dream unfulfilled. The Order of the Faith and Peace serves as a poignant reminder that in the Middle Ages, a good heart was rarely enough. Without the armor of political power and deep-rooted wealth, even the most virtuous of knightly brotherhoods could be erased by the relentless tide of reality. A king's grand ambition could be shattered not by enemy steel, but by the sea itself. In 1270, King X of Castile, a monarch known as the Wise, set his sights on securing the crucial Strait of Gibraltar from Moorish control. His vision was a new kind of knighthood, the Order of Saint Mary of Spain, a dedicated naval force built from the ground up. This was not a land-based brotherhood adapted for the sea. It was conceived from the start as a royal fleet, its knights as much sailors as they were soldiers. King poured his resources and his hopes into this project, granting the order significant properties and privileges along the coast. Its very existence was a statement of Castilian power, a declaration that the future of the would be won on the waves. For a few brief years, this royal project seemed poised for greatness, a new guardian for Christendom's volatile frontier. Then, with no warning, nature intervened. A monstrous storm gathered over the Mediterranean, a tempest of such fury that it caught the entire fleet of the Order of Saint Mary of Spain at sea. Every warship, the very foundation of the Order's power and purpose, was smashed to splinters and swallowed by the waves. In a single night, the king's grand vision was rendered a hollow shell. The catastrophic loss of its fleet left the Order with no means to fulfill its sacred duty. It was a knightly brotherhood without a battlefield, a naval order without a single ship. Crippled and bankrupt, it lingered for only a short time before being formally merged into the much larger and land-based Order of Santiago. The story of the Order of Saint Mary of Spain is one of pure, unadulterated misfortune, a stark reminder that for all their armor and faith, these brotherhoods were utterly at the mercy of forces far beyond any king's command. Their legacy is a ghost fleet at the bottom of the sea, a promise of what might have been, swallowed by the storm. In the glittering courts of 14th-century Castile, a different kind of knighthood was born, one of silk and loyalty rather than monastic vows. King XI established the Order of the Knights of the Band in 1330, a purely secular brotherhood designed to bind his most powerful nobles to the crown. Its symbol was not a grand cross emblazoned on a shield, but a simple band of cloth worn across the tunic, a visible mark of the king's personal favor. This was chivalry as a political tool, a brilliant strategy to consolidate royal power by rewarding martial skill and unwavering allegiance with honor and prestige. For a time, the band was the most coveted distinction in the kingdom, a sign that its wearer stood at the very heart of court. But this strength was also its fatal weakness. The order's entire existence, its very soul, was the king himself. It was a reflection of his will, his charisma, his personal authority. So what happens when the sun around which such an order orbits suddenly vanishes? The answer came with death. The order of the band did not fall in battle or face formal dissolution. Instead, it suffered a far quieter fate, the slow death of irrelevance. Without the king's personal hand to bestow the band and give it meaning, the honor lost its luster. New orders of chivalry arose, backed by new monarchs with their own courts and their own favorites. The band, once a symbol of supreme loyalty, became a relic of a previous reign, its knights forgotten, its purpose faded. Here, the fragility of a knightly order is laid bare not in a clash of swords, but in the silent passing of a single man, proving that a legacy built on one person's vision is a castle built on sand. This dependence on a sole patron finds a chilling parallel in our next story, where the entire purpose of a brotherhood was tied not to a king, but to a single, fleeting conflict. A dragon coiled in defense of the cross became the emblem of another brotherhood tied to a single king's ambition. King of Hungary founded the Order of the Dragon in 1408, creating a chivalric society for his most powerful nobles with a clear and urgent mission. Their sworn duty was to defend a besieged Christendom from the relentless expansion of the Ottoman Empire. This was no ordinary monastic order. It was a strategic alliance of the elite, bound by oath and a shared symbol to unite the Christian nobility against a common foe. For a time, it worked brilliantly, uniting powerful figures across Hungary and the surrounding realms under its banner. Its membership even included a Wallachian named the Second, who proudly took the sobriquet, meaning the dragon, in honor of his induction. Yet this very success, built on the personal authority of a monarch, contained the seeds of its collapse. What happens to a league of powerful nobles when the king who bound them together is gone? The answer unfolded with stark clarity after his death. The order lost its central pillar, its unifying force. Without his leadership, the Grand Alliance quickly splintered as the individual interests of its high-born members pulled them in different directions. The Order of the Dragon did not meet a dramatic end. It simply unraveled from within, its political cohesion dissolving into nothing. But its symbol, the dragon, lived on, taking a dark and unexpected path. The second son, the third, inherited his father's title, becoming known as Dracula or Son of the Dragon. He was a brutally effective warlord, and his infamous reputation for impaling his enemies slowly began to eclipse the original, sacred meaning of the dragon emblem. The symbol of Christian defense was gradually twisted, transformed in the public imagination into a herald of terror and cruelty. Over centuries, this connection was cemented by folklore and fiction, until the dragon became irrevocably linked not to a chivalric order, but to a vampire legend. The true history of the Order of the Dragon was consumed, its purpose entirely obscured by the monstrous shadow of Count Dracula. Here, an order's legacy was not just forgotten, it was stolen, its noble intent forever buried under the weight of a far more seductive and terrifying myth. A king's gratitude could forge a knightly order as quickly as his troubles could break it. In 1268, Charles I of Naples, fresh from a decisive military victory, established the Order of the Crescent. This was not a brotherhood born from monastic vows or a call to crusade, but from raw political calculation. Its purpose was singular and temporary, to bind the loyalties of the French knights who had fought for him, ensuring their continued service as he consolidated his power in southern Italy. The crescent emblem they wore was a badge of immediate allegiance, a glittering reward for past service and a promise of future favor. For a brief, brilliant moment, these knights were the inner circle of a conquering king. But their entire reason for being was tied to the success of own ambitions. When his campaigns in Italy began to falter, and the complex web of Mediterranean politics shifted against him, the Order of the Crescent lost its value almost overnight. It was a tool that had served its purpose and was now discarded. Without a deeper religious mission or a permanent military role to sustain it, the order simply evaporated from official records, leaving behind little more than a mention in a few chronicles. Its story is in political ephemerality, a knightly brotherhood that lived and died by the fortunes of one man's throne. How many such orders were created not for God or country, but for the fleeting needs of a royal court? The fate of the Crescent reminds us that the most fragile orders were sometimes those built not on faith or land, but on the shifting sands of a king's immediate necessity. Far from the familiar power centers of Europe, the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia clung to survival on the rugged coast of the Mediterranean. This was a Christian island in a rising Muslim sea, a kingdom perpetually braced for the next wave of conflict. It was here, in this precarious frontier state, that the Order of Saint forged its identity. These knights were not transplants from the West, but a unique fusion of two worlds, blending the armored tradition of European chivalry with the ancient rites and language of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Their very existence was a testament to the kingdom's need for a dedicated military force that understood both the local terrain and the complex geopolitics of the region. For generations, they served as a crucial bulwark, one of the primary defenders of a realm whose sovereignty was always under threat. Their purpose was the survival of Cilician Armenia itself. But a fortress is only as strong as the land it stands upon. In 1375, that land finally gave way. The Sultanate, a relentless military power, delivered the final, crushing blow, conquering the kingdom and extinguishing its royal line. With the fall of the capital at Sis, the Order of Saint was severed from its very soul. It lost its king, its homeland, and every reason for its continued existence. There was no grand ceremony of dissolution, no royal decree to mark its end. The order simply shattered, its knights vanishing into the chaos of defeat, perhaps fleeing into the mountains or blending into the population. Their history, their distinct blend of Eastern and Western traditions, was swallowed by the overwhelming tragedy of a nation's fall. The Order of Saint stands as a profound lesson in symbiotic fate, a stark reminder that a knightly order could be so deeply rooted in its homeland that when the kingdom died, the knights died with it, leaving behind only echoes in the chronicles of a lost world. While some orders were shattered by storms, others were rendered obsolete by the rising tide of progress. On the rugged Atlantic coast of 14th-century Portugal, King Denis I created the Order of the Ship, a brotherhood with a vision as bold as the ocean itself. This was not an order for landlocked knights. Its very identity was maritime, founded to reward and inspire the daring Portuguese captains and sailors who were pushing the boundaries of the known world. At a time when there was still ongoing and the first tentative voyages of exploration were beginning, the Order of the Ship was a revolutionary idea. It celebrated naval skill and seafaring courage, as virtues equal to any knightly charge on a battlefield. Its members were the pioneers who braved the treacherous currents and unknown horizons, their exploits honored with this unique distinction. But the order was, in many ways, a prototype, a brilliant first draft of a concept that would soon be perfected. Its existence was brief, a flicker of institutional innovation. As Portugal's ambitions grew, it needed a far more powerful engine to drive its age of discoveries. That engine was the Order of Christ, a colossal institution that rose from the ashes of the dissolved Templars, inheriting their vast wealth, properties, and global network. The Order of the Ship, with its limited scope and resources, was simply absorbed or made redundant by this new maritime superpower. The smaller order's innovative vision did not die. It was simply inherited and executed on a scale it could never have achieved. The Order of the Ship became the forgotten blueprint, its purpose entirely fulfilled by its legendary successor, a quiet casualty of its own nation's spectacular success. A name can survive long after its original meaning has been erased. The phantom history of the Order of the Tower and Sword in Portugal offers a perfect example of this strange fate. Most records point to its origins in the 15th century, a time when King V was leading ambitious campaigns to seize territories in North Africa. It is believed he founded this knightly brotherhood to commemorate those hard-fought victories, perhaps to honor the men who stormed the walls of Moroccan cities. But here the historical trail does not just grow cold, it vanishes almost completely. We are left with a name and a plausible reason for its creation, but almost nothing else. What did its original members actually do? How many knights wore its emblem? What rules did they live by? The answers are swallowed by silence. This original order is a true ghost, its substance so thoroughly lost that we can only infer it ever existed at all. Its complete disappearance was so absolute that centuries later, in the 1800s, the Portuguese monarchy felt no hesitation in reviving the name for a brand new order of chivalry. One with entirely different symbols and purposes. The original Order of the Tower and Sword was not just forgotten. Its legacy was so completely wiped away that its very identity became an empty vessel, ready to be filled with a new story by a new era. It stands as a haunting lesson in how an order can be erased not by conquest or merger, but by the simple, relentless passage of time, leaving behind a name that echoes in a void. Sometimes, the most vital knightly work happened far from any battlefield. In the quiet, rural landscape of the county of Hainaut, a small band of brothers formed an order dedicated to a very specific and terrifying affliction. The Order of Saint in Hainaut was not a military force, but a hospitaller one, its knights trading swords for salves and their fortress for an infirmary. Their sworn enemy was a horrific disease known then as Saint Fire, a name that barely hints at the agony it caused. Today we understand this as ergotism, a poisoning caused by a fungus that grows on rye bread, but in the Middle Ages, its victims suffered what seemed like a divine punishment. Their limbs would blacken and wither as if burned by an invisible flame, accompanied by convulsions and hallucinations. It was against this silent, creeping horror that the Knights of Hainaut waged their quiet war. They provided shelter, comfort, and care for those shunned by society, turning their small corner of what is now Belgium into a sanctuary of mercy. While a larger, more famous Order of Saint operated across Europe, this Hainaut branch carved out its own local identity, serving its community with a distinct, autonomous spirit. Yet this very local focus, this deep roots in a single county became the limit of its reach. It never grew beyond its regional borders, and its specialized mission made it vulnerable. In the 13th century, the vast and powerful Order of St. John, the Knights, absorbed the small brotherhood. There was no dramatic conflict, no last stand. The Order of Saint in Hainaut simply faded into the administrative fabric of a giant, its unique local history blending seamlessly into the grand narrative of an international organization. Its fate is a classic, almost gentle form of disappearance, a reminder that for every order erased by a sword, another was simply quieted by a ledger. How many other small, essential brotherhoods were simply filed away, their good works recorded only as a single line in a larger institution's account books, even within a giant, surviving institution. Unique identities could be quietly erased by the slow grind of bureaucracy. Consider the strange case of the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem in Poland. This was not the famous order you know from the Crusades, but something far more specific, a local commandery that for a crucial period operated with remarkable independence from its international parent. In the complex political landscape of Poland, these knights managed their own estates, answered to local priorities, and developed a character that was distinctly their own, a Polish branch on a vast, global tree. They served as a vital local force, their presence woven into the fabric of the nation's defense and charity. But such autonomy rarely lasts within a centralized organization. As the main body of the Knights worked to standardize its operations across Europe, to streamline its command and consolidate its resources, this Polish entity became a problem, an outlier. The central command began to reassert its control, pulling the reins of power back to its international headquarters. There was no dramatic battle, no royal decree against them. The process was one of quiet, administrative absorption. Their unique statutes were replaced by the global rulebook, their local leadership was brought under direct foreign oversight, and their distinct history was simply filed away into the main order's records. The knights themselves did not vanish, but their unique Polish identity did. They became just another province in a vast network, their autonomous story fading from view until it was forgotten altogether. This is a loss of a different kind, where an order disappears not from the world, but from our memory of it, consumed by the very structure that gave it life. It proves that historical oblivion can come not from a sword, but from a stamp. From this quiet absorption within a powerful order, we journey to a tale of far more violent and deliberate erasure. Even a name as grand as the Holy Ghost could not guarantee an order's survival. In 13th century Italy, far from the epic Crusades, a small brotherhood was founded under this powerful invocation. This Order of the Holy Ghost, distinct from the later and more famous French Order of the Holy Spirit, carved out a humble but essential niche. Its mission was a dual one, blending the gentle work of caring for the sick with the hard duty of providing military support to the Papal States. Think of these knights as both hospitallers and guardians, men who might tend to a feverish patient in the morning and stand watch on a crumbling wall that afternoon. They served a local need, protecting the Church's own territories in a perpetually unstable Italian peninsula. Their entire world was this small sphere of influence, a life of quiet dedication to a very specific patch of land and its people. Yet this local focus was also their cage. They never acquired the sprawling estates of the great international orders. They lacked the deep treasuries, the political connections, and the steady stream of new recruits from across Europe that fueled the longevity of the Templars or the They were a neighborhood watch with nightly vows, vital to their community but invisible on the wider stage. When political winds shifted, as they constantly did in medieval Italy, a small order like this had no buffer, no fallback position. It simply could not withstand the pressure. There was no single event that destroyed it, no dramatic battle or royal decree. The Order of the Holy Ghost just gradually faded away, its members growing old, its small holdings slowly being absorbed by local monasteries or civic authorities. Its hospital duties were likely assumed by a city's charitable guild, its military role taken over by a mercenary company in the Pope's pay. Its story is one of pure, unspectacular evaporation, a reminder that for every knightly order that blazed across the historical sky, 100 others glowed like embers for a time, only to cool and turn to ash, leaving behind not even a whisper of their once sacred fire. A different kind of erasure unfolded in the heart of Prague, where a knightly order did not vanish but was instead hollowed out, its warrior soul carefully removed. The Order of the Knights of the Cross with the Red Star stands apart on our list, a singular brotherhood born not from a crusading decree, but from the vision of a remarkable woman, Saint of Bohemia. In the early 13th century, its foundation was deeply local, the only military order to ever originate in the lands of Bohemia, and its beginnings were entirely peaceful. These brothers started as hospitallers, their mission focused on a single, vital bridge over the Vltava River. They built a hospital there, tending to the sick and offering safe passage to travelers, their distinctive red star emblem a beacon of mercy in the bustling city. But the medieval world rarely allowed for such pure intentions to remain unchallenged. To protect their hospital, their bridge, and the people in their care from the bandits and rival factions that threatened the city, they were forced to pick up the sword. They evolved, gaining papal recognition as a formal military order, a unique fusion of healer and guardian rooted entirely in Czech soil. For a time, they were both monks and knights, their identity woven from these two powerful threads. Yet the tide of history slowly pulled these threads apart. As the centuries turned, the very need for their military role faded away. The political landscape of Central Europe stabilized, and the specific threats that demanded their martial presence simply evaporated. What use was a sword without a battle to fight? The order made a conscious, gradual choice, a long retreat from violence. It shed its military function completely, reverting back to its original healing purpose. Today, the order still exists, but as a purely religious and charitable organization, a quiet chapter of canons dedicated to good works. Its knights are gone. The and the sword have been replaced by the cassock and the prayer book. For our search, this is a profound form of burial. The Order of the Knights of the Cross with the Red Star did not fall in battle or get dissolved by a king. It underwent a metamorphosis so complete that its foundational identity as a knightly brotherhood is now a ghost, a piece of historical trivia overshadowed by its modern, peaceful incarnation. Its martial past is not celebrated, but remembered as a curious, distant phase, a fossil preserved within the bedrock of its current existence. This is a loss not of existence, but of essence, a quiet rewriting of a chapter that leaves the book intact but forever alters its meaning. A name can be a shield, but it can also become a cage. On the rugged southern frontier of Portugal, a small but determined brotherhood carried the name of Saint James, the very same patron saint venerated by the mighty Spanish Order of Santiago. But this was not a branch of that famous giant. The Portuguese Order of St. James of the Sword was its own entity, born from the same fiery crucible of the. Its knights wore the familiar scallop shell, but their allegiance was to the Portuguese crown, their swords dedicated to a single, grinding task: pushing the Moorish forces ever southward and securing the volatile borderlands for their king. For generations, they were a vital local force, their identity intertwined with the soil they fought to reclaim. Yet this shared name, this connection to a legendary saint, created a constant, silent competition. How could a smaller Portuguese order stand apart when its very identity was mirrored by a colossal, internationally recognized power just across the border? The answer, delivered in the late 14th century, was that it could not. To streamline the defense of the realm and consolidate royal control over all military orders, the Portuguese crown made a simple, administrative decision. The Order of St. James of the Sword was formally merged into the larger, purely Portuguese Order of. There was no battle, no dramatic fall from grace. It was a quiet annexation, a bureaucratic absorption. The knights simply changed the specific emblem on their surcoats, their properties were folded into a growing portfolio, and their distinct history as an independent brotherhood was promptly forgotten. Their legacy was not destroyed, but dissolved, like a stream flowing into a much larger river. The story of this order is a subtle lesson in how even a holy name could not protect a knightly brotherhood from being consumed by the relentless drive for efficiency and power. Its separate story erased by the very success of its own national project. The grandest of dreams can die in the quiet of a council chamber. In the late 14th century, as the last Crusader kingdoms crumbled into memory, Philip II, the powerful Duke of Burgundy, conceived a final, glorious answer to the tragedy. He called it the Order of the Passion of Jesus Christ, a brotherhood designed with one magnificent purpose: to launch a new crusade and reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom. This was not a modest proposal. Elaborate plans were drafted. A detailed rule was written outlining its monastic and military structure, and its proposed banner was meant to inspire all of Europe. It was a complete blueprint for a knightly order, a perfect machine of faith and war existing entirely on parchment. Yet that is precisely where it remained. The political landscape of Europe had fractured. Kings were preoccupied with their own wars and rivalries, their treasuries drained by endless conflicts. The fervent popular zeal that once sent thousands marching to the Holy Land had cooled into pragmatic local concerns. No army was raised, no castles were built, no knights ever took its vows. The Order of the Passion is the ultimate ghost, a knightly brotherhood that never drew a single breath. It represents the final, whispered farewell to the crusading ideal, a magnificent plan that collapsed under the sheer weight of a changing world, leaving behind only a haunting question in its unfinished manuscripts. What becomes of a vow that is never sworn? It becomes a monument to an era's dying ambitions, a lost order defined not by its fall, but by the fact it never rose at all. Yet even a ghost can leave a faint scent of perfume. The 22nd Lost Order, the Order of the Bee, flits at the very edge of historical vision, a whisper of chivalry from the French court of 1703. Its story is not one of battlefields or grand crusades, but of a drawing-room intrigue. Tradition holds that it was founded not by a king or a pope, but by a single French lady of the court, a private society for a select few. The bee, a symbol of industry and a harmonious community, was its chosen emblem, suggesting an order built on ideals of refined virtue and loyalty among the elite. There are no chronicles of its great deeds, no lists of its landed properties, no tomb. Its entire history rests on a handful of vague references and a lingering question: did it truly exist at all? For some historians, the Order of the Bee is a phantom, a piece of heraldic fiction or a mistaken reference to some other, better documented society. Its obscurity is so profound that its own reality is the central mystery. If it was real, it was a delicate creation, a private club with knightly airs, utterly disconnected from the raw power and military function that sustained the great orders of the Middle Ages. Without lands to manage, without wars to fight, without a public role to play, it left no footprint on the world. Its disappearance was not an event, but an inevitability. When its founding patroness passed away, or when the fashions of the court shifted, the Order of the Bee simply ceased to meet, its members dispersing, its symbolic honeycomb dissolving into the air of history. It represents the ultimate form of loss, an order so private, so minor, that its very existence becomes a subject for debate. A fleeting spark of chivalric sentiment in an age that had long forgotten the true weight of a sword. High in the remote alpine valleys of a small brotherhood fought a battle not of swords, but of souls. The Order of St. George of, also known as the Knights of after the abbey they called home, was founded in the 13th century for a mission that defined the very edge of Christendom. Their task was not to reclaim a holy city, but to tame a wilderness. This was a spiritual and territorial frontier, a land where ancient pagan beliefs clung stubbornly to the mountains and forests. The Knights of St. George were colonizers in armor, their duty to secure this rugged region for the church and the crown, to build settlements, and to convert the local population. For generations, they were the mailed fist of colonization in that specific, beautiful, and unforgiving landscape. They built more than just castles, they built communities, imposing a new religious and social order upon the land. Yet their success contained the seeds of their obsolescence. Once the frontier was settled, once the region was securely Christian and integrated into the broader political fabric of the Habsburg realms, what need was there for a specialized military order dedicated to that single, completed task, their entire reason for being evaporated? They lingered for a time, a small and increasingly irrelevant institution, until the 16th century brought a final, administrative end. With the Protestant Reformation sweeping through Europe, the Catholic Church moved to consolidate its resources. In a quiet transaction, the order was formally dissolved, and all of its once vital properties were transferred to the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, a new kind of religious army for a new kind of spiritual war. The Knights of did not fall in battle, they were simply made redundant by the very peace they had helped to create, their local story swallowed by the grand narrative of European religious conflict. They are a perfect example of an order that accomplished its mission so thoroughly that it wrote itself out of existence, a quiet success that led to a quiet burial. A king's favor can be a delicate chain, binding loyalty with a symbol of honor. In 1469, King Louis XI of France, a ruler known for his cunning statecraft, forged just such a chain with the Order of the Collar of St. Michael. This was not a crusading brotherhood, but a political. Louis designed it to encircle his most powerful and potentially rebellious nobles, binding them directly to the crown with a shared emblem of prestige. The collar itself, a chain of scallop shells linked by knots, was a physical reminder of their sworn allegiance. For decades, this original order served its purpose perfectly, creating an exclusive circle of royal favor that strengthened the monarchy's grip on a fractious aristocracy. Yet the very nature of royal power is that it is never static. Each new monarch seeks to leave their own mark, to create their own instruments of control. The fate of order was not dissolution, but something more insidious, a slow and deliberate transformation. In 1578, King Henry III established the far more lavish and prestigious Order of the Holy Spirit. This new institution did not replace the collar of Saint Michael, it simply swallowed it. The older order was not abolished, but its statutes were altered, its membership was expanded, and its original, pointed political purpose was diluted. The exclusive club Louis had designed to control his nobles became a mere stepping stone, a lesser honor on the path to the greater glory of the Holy Spirit. The foundational identity of the 1469 order, that sharp tool of royal policy, was buried under layers of new ceremony and revised intent. It was a quiet assassination of meaning. The name survived, but the original purpose, the specific political weapon forged by a shrewd king, was lost forever, its distinct history obscured by the glittering shadow of its more famous successor. This is how a legacy can be erased not by conquest or catastrophe, but by the slow, deliberate hand of a successor, repurposing the past until its original shape is forgotten. Our journey ends not with a bang, but with a whisper. The purported Order of the Lily is the most spectral of all, a name that appears in the historical record like a faint perfume with no discernible source. Allegedly a Spanish brotherhood, its existence is built on the most fragile of foundations, a handful of scattered and contradictory references that offer no clear portrait of its purpose, its members, or even the century of its founding. Was it a genuine, if incredibly minor, local militia sworn to protect a single valley or pilgrimage route? Or was it something else entirely, a poetic invention, a chivalric title used in a romantic tale that later chroniclers mistakenly recorded as fact? We are left with only the elegant name itself, the lily, a symbol of purity and royalty floating in a void of context. Its profound ambiguity delivers a final, unsettling lesson about the nature of historical loss. We have traced orders that fell to swords, to storms, to mergers, and to the slow death of purpose. But the Order of the Lily represents a different category of disappearance, one where the line between a real brotherhood and a beautiful story becomes irreparably blurred. It forces us to ask, at what point does a forgotten history become a legend? Its inclusion on this list is a necessary admission that some gaps in our knowledge can never be filled. These 25 lost orders, from the tragic Knights of Saint to the ghostly Lily, reveal a medieval world of staggering complexity, where countless threads of ambition, faith, and duty were woven into the tapestry of history, only for so many to be pulled loose, leaving behind only tantalizing patterns of what might have been. These recurring patterns reveal a stark truth about the medieval world. The disappearance of a knightly order was rarely a simple accident, but the predictable outcome of a handful of relentless pressures. The most common fate was absorption, a quiet annexation by a larger, hungrier institution. Think of the Brothers of, their entire identity swallowed by the Teutonic Order, or the Portuguese Order of St. James of the Sword, seamlessly folded into the Order of for administrative efficiency. This was the chivalric equivalent of a small family business being bought out by a vast corporation, its unique story erased by a ledger entry. Then there was the sudden, catastrophic end. A single battle, like the one that annihilated the Livonian Brothers of the Sword or a single storm, like the one that shattered the entire fleet of the Order of Saint Mary of Spain, could erase decades of effort in a single day. For these brotherhoods, existence was a precarious gamble where the house always won. Political fragility was another constant threat. An order's lifeblood was often the favor of a single powerful patron. When that patron died, as with King the 11th and his Order of the Band, or when their political project failed, as with Charles of Naples and his Order of the Crescent, the knightly institution built upon that foundation crumbled into irrelevance. Their purpose was borrowed, and when the lender called in the debt, there was nothing left. Perhaps the most poignant end was the slow death of obsolescence. An order like St. George of succeeded so completely in taming its frontier that it rendered its own military role unnecessary. It was a victim of its own success, its warriors made redundant by the very peace they had forged. And finally, there were the phantoms, the stillborn dreams like the Order of the Passion, magnificent plans that never left the parchment, their potentials snuffed out by a world that had simply moved on. These 25 stories in all their variety form a single, sobering lesson. In the Middle Ages, even an institution sworn to God and clad in steel was ultimately at the mercy of forces far beyond any knight's control. Their collective fate asks us a difficult question. How many of our own modern institutions, which feel so permanent and solid, might one day be just another name on a list of what was lost to? Journey through the annals of forgotten chivalry has revealed a hidden dimension of the Middle Ages. A landscape where countless brotherhoods rose and fell outside the grand narratives we know so well. These 25 lost orders of knights were far more than just footnotes in a dusty chronicle. They were living, breathing institutions, each one a unique reflection of the diverse needs, the soaring ambitions, and the deep-seated fears of their specific time and place. Think of the quiet dedication of the At, safeguarding pilgrims on a dangerous road, and then contrast that with the grand, tragic vision of the naval knights of Saint Mary of Spain, whose entire fleet was lost to a single storm. Each story of devotion, of sudden disaster, or of quiet dissolution adds another layer to our understanding of this incredibly complex era. They remind us with startling clarity that history is not a simple story written solely by the victors. It is also a vast library of stories that have been misplaced, forgotten by the relentless and indifferent passage of time. Let their newly rediscovered legacies inspire you to look a little deeper into the shadows of the past, to question the familiar tales. For even in the deepest obscurity, there are profound lessons to be learned about resilience, faith, and the fragility of power, and there are always new wonders waiting to be found. If these tales of lost brotherhoods have captivated you, we would love to hear which story resonated most. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the hidden corners of history.